Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, Southern Appalachian Herbs at blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I'm really looking forward to this one. This is one of my favorite herbs we're going to talk about today. And I think just more than anything, I'm just really feeling very content on this absolutely beautiful, beautiful last Sunday evening in August. Went to Mass this morning. It was really nice. Came back, made some guacamole, and so I'm full of good food, got a nice glass of wine, and I'm just really feeling good today. Last week was my birthday, and my mom wanted to bake me a cake. She wanted to use my grandmother's chocolate pound cake recipe and some cherry preserves, a little, topping, and maybe a little brandy with it. And so we got together at a family place down in the middle of the state. And my tradition is I love to cook on my birthday. So the deal was she made the cake and I put together just this full, Mexican spread. We're talking fajitas. I made pico de gallo. I made guacamole. Um, I made salsa verde with tomatillos. We had the grilled vegetables. There were some shrimp and smoked oysters, and it's just a lot of my favorite foods. So it's been a really nice just few days to relax, to eat a lot of really fantastic food. And before I did all that, she had already made some pot roast and gravy and mashed potatoes and cornbread and collard greens and speckled butter beans. Speckled butter beans are an heirloom bean, more popular in the eastern part of North Carolina and like upstate South Carolina. You hardly find them anywhere else. So I have been eating very well and am feeling really good. And what's really nice about all these foods, is they do have medicinal value. I'll just for instance, a pico de gallo. What's more simple than that? Chop up some tomatoes, onions, garlic, throw in some cilantro, lemon juice, salt and pepper, some hot peppers. That's good immune stimulant. It's good for digestion. It's good for all kinds of stuff. Very antioxidant. The guacamole I made a couple of times now in the past few days. I am very untraditional in my guacamole. When I was younger, I dated a couple of Mexican girls, and I picked up some of their family recipes. One was from Oaxaca, and one was from Guadalajara. So it was actually another one from Tijuana. That's where their families were from. A lot of Mexican folks, in the mountains. They work in the Christmas trees seasonally, and a lot of them have come to call it home. And beautiful Mexican girls. I was really very very pleased to grow up and get a chance to learn some of their family traditions. So all those are very different regions with very different styles of cooking. And I took a little from this and a little from that, and I just kind of mix it all together. And then I throw in what's for my own taste. So, for instance, the guacamole I just ate, which is really just delicious, absolutely suited my taste, and not at all traditionally Mexican, right? I take two or three ripe avocados. You will find out you judge a ripe avocado by the feel. It should feel like a hard-boiled egg, essentially. It should be slightly giving when you kind of press into it, but firm, right? You don't want hard avocado, and you don't want a mushy avocado. Cut it open, kind of twist, and the seed will come out on one side. It'll still be sitting in the other one. Take the heel of your knife and just kind of pop it into the pit and pull it right out. Scoop a ripe avocado out with a spoon. It couldn't be easier. Squeeze on lemon juice. Say for 3 avocados, I'd use a whole lemon, just the juice, of course, salt and pepper. Chop up a few jalapenos or serranos or habaneros or whatever you like in there, cilantro, and just what was it, last week or week before we talked about coriander and cilantro and all the great health benefits of that. I dice very fine an onion, put it in there, 3 or 4 cloves of garlic. And I mean, onions and garlic are immune stimulative, they're anti-inflammatory, they're good for blood pressure, they're antiviral, antibiotic, antiseptic. I mean, those are, the alliums are some of our most medicinal plants. Smash the garlic really well and then chop it fine and put it in. And I guess that's it. Oh, I also would dice a tomato and mix that in, and a couple of spoonfuls of sour cream, and that's where I go very non-traditional. I just really like the taste of the sour cream with the avocado. It just works for me. And yeah, maybe a few dashes of some hot sauce or something if I want a little extra tang. Just so rich and satisfying good. There are very few things better than some nice, medium rare grilled steak with some guacamole. But that's really something I've been thinking about a lot while I've been writing my cookbook, is the importance of home cooking, the importance of paying attention, making good food, using good quality ingredients, how it's good for your health, but it's also good for your mood, it's good for your mind, it's good for your spirit. As a Christian, especially as a Catholic, the central feature of our worship, when we go to church, is the Eucharist. It's communion, as they call it in Protestant churches. It's when we have a meal. We eat the body and blood of Christ spiritually. It is, Protestants believe it's symbolic. Catholics and Orthodox believe that the physical bread and wine becomes the spiritual body and blood of Christ. Any way you look at it, the most traditional aspect of our religion, no matter what denomination you are, if you're Christian, revolves around a meal. That meal is a representation of the Passover feast in the Jewish tradition. I think many, if not most, religions base much of their tradition around a sacrificial meal. I think it's a very part of um, really humanity, what it means to be human, how we relate to both the physical and spiritual. And I think one of the biggest shames in modern culture, and you can look back, you can figure out this when this happened, when people stopped cooking at home as much, when they started getting more takeout, eating more fast food, or even like the old frozen dinners people would eat in front of the TV, TV dinners. A lot of that happened after the World Wars when the canning industry, the Post Company, Bird's Eye, and all that had figured out, and of course Campbell's soup and all that, had figured out how to prepare foods that could be shipped to our soldiers overseas, that could be easily reheated. And after the World Wars, they just started marketing it to American citizens. I mean, civilians, is what I'm trying to say, to the domestic consumer. And that's when, Chef Boyardee came out with their very, sweet pasta. And that's when all these Campbell's soup casseroles started coming out. And everything became about speed and convenience. Really, no fault divorce didn't happen until the 60s. So before the 1960s, most people stayed together. They didn't get divorced. And most women did not work outside the home. So most women were still cooking, and it was getting a lot easier for them because they had all these convenience foods, and they had more time on their hands, and that gave them more of a chance to think about working outside of the home. And of course, if you made a lot of money, you could even hire a maid or a cook, right? And then our whole society just changed and broke down in the 60s and 70s. Now more than half of marriages end in divorce, and over a third, and in many communities, over half of all children are born out of wedlock. So very few children grow up in intact households with a mother and a father, whether both are working or one is working. But it's such a devastating shame that We don't have the family table anymore. If you think about, well, I mean, the Christian concept of all Christians being the family of God, there's a big part of that the family, the home, is the smallest church. It is the representative of the larger church. The parents relating to their children, and the central altar, we might say, of that home really is the family table. When you take that away, when you take away eating together and the communication, the expressions of love through food, conversations, the family unit begins to deteriorate and break down. And even more so since people have moved so far away from their grandparents. I mean, you're lucky now if you can go to your grandparents for a big Thanksgiving meal. Yeah, I was very lucky growing up like that. I had my grandparents and my great grandparents, and we had, Thanksgiving and Christmas together, but all, it's all over now. They're gone. I think as important as herbal medicine is, I honestly would say that family table, home cooking from scratch with real food and real ingredients and sharing it with people you care about is probably a whole lot more important than tinctures and teas and infusions in terms of keeping people happy and healthy, both physically, mentally, and spiritually. I think we really have to get back to the family table and the family unit. We need to strengthen that, or no amount of health care or counseling or education or anything is ever going to compensate for those most basic things that have been almost wiped out in a matter of what, two, three generations, going back to like the mid 60s. That's it. There's a reason, people still like to watch the Andy Griffith Show. There's still something inside every one of us that craves that needs it. So now let's move on to the herbs. And as I said, this is one of my favorite herbs. It is one of most people's most hated plants, believe it or not. It is the ubiquitous dandelion. Dandelions are not actually native to North America. Dandelions were brought to the Americas by settlers from Europe as food and medicine. They grew dandelion greens and ate them. I love dandelion greens. Specifically, dandelions that grow in full sun, especially after they flowered and gone to seed, are going to be bitter. They're going to be very bitter. Sometimes not so much, but mostly bitter. Ones that are in richer soil, in the shade, especially if you pick them in the spring, are really no more bitter than certain types of lettuce. They have a little slight bitterness countered with a slight sweetness, and they're quite good. They're tender. And usually those dandelions grow much larger leaves. And those leaves make good salads just eaten raw if they're nice and tender. But really, one of the nicest ways to eat them is to get a pan going, put some fat in there, whatever fat you like. I mean, whether it's butter, pork fat, olive oil, it's, none of my concern. Just don't use artificial things. Don't use vegetable oils. I mean, yes, I know how vegetable oils are made, but let's think about this logically. Have you ever squeezed oil out of a carrot? If you've never squeezed oil out of I don't know, a cabbage, you kind of look at that vegetable oil and think, yeah, that probably isn't very good for me because it's not natural, right? Vegetable oil, margarine, uh, canola oil, which really shouldn't be bad on its own, but because it's soaked with so much Roundup and other chemicals, pretty not good. So if you can get more natural oils, that's always best. And, really what's more natural than butter from a cow or lard from a pig? But olive oil is also very nice too. Just make sure you get extra virgin olive oil. That's the oil from the first pressing. They can use chemicals and heat to extract more oil after the first and second pressings are done. And that becomes essentially as bad as margarine. I mean, if you're going to buy olive oil, get the extra virgin olive oil. Otherwise, really animal fats are much better for you. And Other, nut fats are pretty good. Almond oil, walnut oil, sunflower seed oil is pretty good. It's just always make sure that you're getting as close to a natural fat as possible. Our bodies can't work without fat. Our hormones are made from the fat that we consume. Our brains are mostly fat, believe it or not. When you start doing a low fat diet, um, you really run into a ton of health issues. Check out the Weston A. Price Foundation about all that. I don't need to go off on a tangent on that. But low cholesterol will actually kill you. Okay. Actually, high cholesterol has never been proven to have killed anyone. It's just really something they began to believe, really thanks to thanks to a con man named Ansel Keys, that fat made you fat, or that cholesterol was like really bad for your heart. There are certain conditions that are usually genetic, where people have like essentially little tears in their artery, and the cholesterol can begin to collect there. And yes, that can kill a person. One of the better treatments for that doctors use are high doses of vitamin B, niacin in particular. That's really the main instance in where cholesterol is actually bad for you. But see, here's the thing, even for that kind of person, they're going to have less artery clogging fats. Marty Robbins was a good example. The great country singer Marty Robbins had that condition. His body did not process cholesterol very well. Uh, I hope you don't have that condition. It's very serious. He died young. Um, but even then, that margarine, that vegetable shortening, the artificial fats, far more prone to clogging the arteries than say chicken fat and pork fat and beef fat and olive oil and the nut oils and the good stuff. But anyway, you can take those dandelion greens and just wash them. Don't dry them. Leave a little moisture on them. Pop them in a pan with some bacon grease, which is like what I like to use. Pull the bacon out and some onions. Cook them down a little bit. Um, Put them on a plate. Dress them with some vinegar. Put the bacon back on top, dig in, and enjoy. They're absolutely delicious. Dandelions are also very useful for making wine. Dandelion flowers make a very nice light wine, and it's been done, well, for centuries. I mean, throughout Europe, going back to very ancient times, they made dandelion wine. It's just a matter of basically making a tea out of the dandelion blossoms with sugar and then adding yeast and letting it ferment. It's really nice. People call it sunshine in a glass. Now, if you did not want to make a wine out of it, you can make a syrup out of dandelion. You can just we use more sugar and less water, and you cook it down almost into a honey-like syrup. You strain the flowers out, and most people would believe they were eating honey when actually it's a syrup made from dandelion flowers. The base of the flower works white, and the stem for about maybe 2, 3 inches down from there. Makes an excellent bitter. It's a good bitter herb, very good for digestion. You can make a tea out of it, or you can make a tincture out of it. You can use it as digestive bitters. Digestive bitters are good for blood sugar, they're good for digestion, they're good for the liver, they're good for the intestines, they're good to stimulate appetite. I'm talking, at length about bitters. That's a really good use for it. All right, so we've covered the leaves, we've covered the stem, we've covered the flower. What's left but the root? Dandelion root is official herbal medicine. It is absolutely excellent for liver health. It is good for skin. It's really good. We want to harvest those dandelion roots when they're at least 2 years old. It's a perennial plant, by the way. The only thing I don't know of that's useful in a dandelion is the seeds. But you know what? I say scatter those seeds far and wide because I'm not a lawn Nazi. Would much rather have food and herbs, medicinal herbs growing on my property than a bunch of pretty grass that needs constant maintenance and fertilization and pesticides put on it. No, I'd much rather have dandelions growing than I would grass. So anyway, it's the reason I guess I keep chuckling when I think of the dandelion is it was really one of the first herbs that I was exposed to, when I started becoming an herbalist in the mountains. And aside from the Hicks family that I really learned a lot from, there were other herbalists in the area. And some of them were what they used to call granny ladies. Sometimes they were called witch women, but you didn't call them that to their face, you know. They were usually down way down back country roads, and they're the people that the local folks, the country folks, went to when they were sick because they didn't have the money or the trust in professional doctors. And I got to know, a few of them and several of their relatives, that I grew up with. And one of an ex-girlfriend, I guess you would say, was the like great niece of one of these granny women that everybody in the mountains knew about. And we spent a days, months, a couple of years just, roaming around through the mountains, taking a swim in a creek, going fishing, walking barefoot through the meadows. Just, she would show me plants. She would point out. She would say, "Do you know what this is?" And if I didn't, she would tell me all the uses that she had learned through her family. And one day, we were sitting there, I think it was after a swim, and we were in the sun on a grassy hill by a cow pasture, actually. And it was just, one of those really peaceful Appalachian mountain scenes on probably a day very much like this, probably late August, golden sunlight everywhere. And she reaches over and picks a dandelion, and she says, "You're a lot like a dandelion." And I said, "Why is that?" Because it was an odd thing to say to a guy. She says, "You're tough. You'll grow anywhere and you can survive just about anything. You're humble, but you stand out." She says, "Really, there's a lot more to you than most folks think, qualities they don't know about, just like this dandelion." And I was speechless, of course. And you know what they say, flattery will get you everywhere. But we ended up becoming good friends, good friends. There's an old Osborne Brothers song, and I think if anybody knows anything about bluegrass, it's probably the first song that comes to their mind. It's Rocky Top. And there's a line in there that says, "Once I knew a girl on Rocky Top, wild as a mink and sweet as soda pop. I still dream about that." So when I'm chuckling about the dandelion, that's very much on my mind. All right, so let's talk about that lowly dandelion. Millions, if not billions, of dollars every year are trying to eradicate from their lawns and golf courses. Well, it's been used at least as far back as the ancient Greeks. Dioscorides wrote about the dandelion under the name chondrilla, and he describes the dandelion. You know exactly what he's talking about. He describes the flower, he describes the seeds, he describes all that. And at this point, he recommended dandelion pounded into small pieces with myrrh and dried out to help with menstrual issues. He mentioned it being made into lozenges and even mixed with saltpeter, which is potassium nitrate, as being good for sunburn. He said the gum of the plant preserves the hair, and the root is good for the same purposes. He said, this is interesting. He said a needle being dipped into the juice of the root and being applied to the hair. I don't really know how that works, but anyway, he said taken as a drink with wine it is also good against vipers. So I don't know how that works, but hey, Dioscorides believed that dandelion root was good against vipers. And the juice boiled with wine and taken as a drink stops the discharge of the bowels. He's talking diarrhea. And he said that the stalk and leaves were good for digestion. Like as I said, using it for a bitter, digestive bitter. And here's a very confusing statement. He said the juice of the stalk and leaves was good for retaining the hair on the eyelids. I am thinking he means eyelashes. I've not encountered anyone with hairy eyelids, and I don't think that would be something you would want to keep, actually. But if he's talking eyelashes, we'll go with that. By the time we get to monastic medicine, after the Roman Empire became the Holy Roman Empire became the seat of Christendom, dandelion became Taraxacum officinale. As I've mentioned before, any herb that is labeled officinale or officinalis means that it was an official herb of herbal medicine. It was grown by the monks, it was kept in the officina, which was their apothecary, and it was one of the most important herbs used. St. Hildegard von Bingen used both, it seems, I will say, both dandelion and chicory interchangeably, and she called them sunny werble. in her old dialect of German. She recommended that the herb be infused in wine with burdock for one who has pain in the chest and a hoarse voice. She also recommended this combination of herbs for digestion. That, is a classic herbal bitters formula. Dandelion and burdock are two herbs that go phenomenally well for liver health, for digestion, for skin complaints that are related to the liver. And, oftentimes actually pain in the chest can be caused by liver inflammation. So it may be that she was recommending something to soothe and reduce liver inflammation for that purpose. Dandelion continued to be used very much in German folk medicine. Brother Aloysius listed it as good for jaundice. Again, it helps the liver. Bladder disorders, weak stomach, consumption, fevers, gravel and renal pain. He's talking, kidney stones and such. Dropsy, good for swollen glands, eczema, all liver complaints, pneumonia, and dysentery. Kind of summing up the German tradition, Maria Treben in her books, which were written in the 70s and 80s, really did so much to revive the tradition of German folk medicine. She said, the plant is looked upon as a troublesome weed in lawns. So obviously, even in Germany, they had forgotten how good it was, or Austria, I think was actually where she was from. She said it is nature's greatest healing aid for suffering mankind. It has two outstanding qualities. It is useful in disorders of the liver and the gallbladder. She recommended it, one of her really more popular cures that a lot of people have had very good results with. She recommended to take the fresh stems from the flower, take about 5 or 6 pieces, and chew them daily to bring swift relief from chronic inflammation of the liver, which she described would be a sharp pain felt in the region of the lower right shoulder blade. As long as the plant is in flower, diabetics should eat up to 10 stems a day. The stems and flowers are washed and the flower head removed and the stems slowly chewed. The taste is somewhat bitter at first, but they are crisp and juicy and similar to a leaf of endive or endive. Like I said, they really do have sort of a lettucey type quality. And endive or endive is actually derived from chicory. It's a cultivated chicory, and dandelion and chicory can be used interchangeably for most everything, really. The flowers of dandelion are a little more useful than the flowers of the chicory, but that's about it. Other than that, they're very similar plants. She said that she recommended dandelion for itchy and scaly rashes and eczema. The skin and the liver are very much related, by the way. So herbalists often treat the liver in order to help with skin conditions. She said the fresh stems could remove gallstones painlessly, and they stimulate the liver and gallbladder. She mentioned that they contained mineral salts and active substances which are of value in metabolic disturbances. She said the dandelion would act as a blood purifier and bring relief to gout and rheumatism, as well as glandular swellings, like Dioscorides has said. Dandelion roots, eaten raw or taken dry in the form of an infusion, purify the blood, improve digestion, and have a diuretic, sudorific, as well as stimulating effect. The sudorific means it's calming, so it's both calming and stimulating at the same time. She said that old herbals state that women used an infusion of the plant and roots as a beauty aid, washing their faces and eyes with it, hoping to gain youthful looks. And she gave the full recipe in her book for the dandelion syrups, which she was really fond of. Apparently, she did that as an annual tradition and put them on. She actually called them biscuits, but um, I think she's really describing something more like a roll. We get a little confused with the term biscuit. I mean, the English mean it as a cookie, and in the South, we mean it as really as a breakfast bread that is in the heritage of a scone. I'm not exactly sure what a biscuit would have been in Austria in her tradition, or if maybe in the translation. But I think she's really talking more like a roll. And if it tastes like honey, and it does actually, it's certainly very enjoyable. Another interesting use she had for dandelion was for acne. And, acne, all kids have it, a lot of adults keep having it. And unfortunately, Doctors like to give them antibiotics like tetracycline, antibiotics that really wreck the gut health and the immune system long term. There are other, topical agents, one might say, that also have, serious side effects. She said that you could use the blood purifying effect of dandelion and stinging nettle to help with acne, taking it as a tea and as a wash. Let's see, and I'll go ahead and give you her dandelion syrup recipe because it's very easy and definitely it'll give you a use for dandelions and make you help you not just look at them as a weed. She said take two heaped double handfuls of dandelion flowers in 1 liter of cold water, slowly brought to a boil, removed from the heat and left to steep overnight. The next day, this is strained and the flowers pressed out, all the liquid saved, and she added to that 1 kilogram of raw sugar and half a sliced lemon. That's it. Then put the lid back on, low heat, brings together until the sugar's dissolved, and it becomes a syrup, which is somewhat thick and very much like honey. Very, very good on buttered bread. So that's super simple, and I guess that's European measurements, a little tough for us Americans to deal with, but it's you can eyeball it. It's not like you're making a jelly or something where you have to be really exact with the amount of sugar. Going back to the 16th century, and we had talked about dandelion's use for as a beauty aid, as she said, and for acne. In the 16th century, dandelion was very popular for removing freckles and liver spots. It was also used for more serious complaints, such as contagious diseases, liver and stomach ailments, and for diarrhea and dysentery and such as that. And the root boiled in wine or vinegar was actually used for constipation. So it kind of has a dual effect, kind of depending on how it's used. In Russia, in their tradition, Igor Vilovich Zevin tells us that dandelion was called the elixir of life because of its wide range of healing properties. He said dandelion roots were purported to be the favorite remedy of Panteleimon the healer. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that name. I'm sorry to any of my Russian listeners. It's Panteleimon. In the Russian Orthodox Church, he's considered a saint, an herbalist who's a saint, and a very popular folk figure. You'll see him in many old paintings and stained glass windows. Is a man with a long blonde beard, kind of stooped, with a basket in the hills gathering herbs. And so he's one of the Eastern saints of herbal medicine. And so what Igor Vilovich Zevin was telling us was that this was his favorite remedy, and he describes him as a Russian Orthodox priest and perhaps the most famous Russian herbalist in history. The dandelion was a favorite remedy among the members of the imperial court and was used extensively by members of the royal family as a general tonic and to treat a variety of health problems. That's something, considering we consider it a weed that you're supposed to spray with Roundup. Gerard said of dandelion of the British tradition, 1500s, said that this plant was in the same family as succory. Well, succory is chicory, and they're actually not that closely related, but they can be used very much interchangeably. And he, of course, explains how it came to be called dandelion. It's actually dent de lion, meaning the tooth of the lion in French. So, and someone looked at it and decided the petals of the flower, or either that or the indented leaves, which is probably more likely, looked like a lion's tooth, and the fanciful French decided to call it dent de lion. But anyway, in England, by the 1500s, it had become to be known as dandelion. And by the interesting yeah, I've told you before how in the 1500s, some of the words they used we might consider offensive today. Dandelion was also called piss a bed. Apparently, it's not only it's not only useful as a diuretic, which may have given it that name, but it was also thought to help kind of tonify the bladder in children and help prevent bedwetting. He said that, well, mostly interchangeable with wild endive or chicory. He said it's cold, but it drieth more, and doth withal cleanse. Let me see if I can get away from the Old English a little bit here. He said it had a more drying quality, which we're talking decreasing secretions, but also very cleansing. And because it is bitter, could be useful for the liver and digestion, just as chicory. He said, boiled, it strengthens the weak stomach, and eaten raw, it stops the belly and helps the dysentery, especially being boiled with lentils. It's actually a very old tradition that goes all the way back, if not to ancient Greece, probably before, was boiling dandelion greens with lentils as a traditional dish. And lentils and greens go really well together, by the way. So it'd be a nice meal as well as beneficial. He actually also recommended against what they used to call nocturnal emissions, something that happens to guys sometimes when they have certain dreams. And the old herbalists used to be very concerned about that. That's actually true of both the Christian tradition and the Taoist and Hindu tradition. It was apparently a very big concern. And there are a lot of herbal remedies for such. He said a decoction of the whole plant would help with yellow jaundice. Yellow jaundice is a very, fairly severe jaundice caused by a weakened liver. And dandelion is one of our best liver herbs. Culpepper, about 100 years later, uh, also like to call it piss a bed. He said, it is well known to have many long and deep gash leaves lying on the ground. I don't have to describe it. He said that the plant was under the dominion of Jupiter. That was his, astrological way of classifying plants. He said it is of an opening and cleansing quality, and therefore very effectual for obstructions of the liver, gall, and spleen, and the diseases that arise from them, as such as jaundice and hypochondria. It openeth the passages of the urine, both in the old and young. It powerfully cleanses imposthumes and inward ulcers in the urinary passage, and by its drying and temperate quality doth afterwards heal them, for which purposes the decoction of the root and the leaves in white wine, for which purposes the decoction of the roots or leaves are steeped in white wine, or the leaves chopped as pot herbs with a few alisanders. I'm not sure what an alisander is. Um, I'm not going to guess. Really, it's an old English term for a vegetable. Um, I'm not sure. Uh, Obviously, one might think it could be golden Alexanders, but golden Alexanders are toxic. I'm not. I'm just not going to guess on that. But we're going to say he's probably talking about cooking dandelions with leeks, just like many of the other herbalists have. And whoever is drawing towards a consumption or an evil disposition of the whole body, called cachexia, again, I don't know what that is. I tried looking it up, and I can't figure that. Thinking it is something like a consumptive or tubercular fever condition. He said, by the use hereof, for some time shall find it a wonderful help. He could be talking the consumptive, effects on the lungs. He could be talking the fevers, the weakness. He could be talking anything really related to tuberculosis, which tuberculosis comes in many forms. And, dandelion has been thought to have some antiviral properties over time. I'll just put it that way. He said it helpeth to procure rest and sleep to bodies distempered by the heat of ague fits. What that means is fevers were what they called agues. When you have a real bad fever and you have the cramps and the pains and you can't sleep, dandelion tea or eating dandelion greens does help with that. Dandelion steeped in wine is an ancient remedy for fevers going back, hundreds, if not thousands of years. And he said the distilled water of the dandelion is effectual to drink in pestilential fevers and to wash the sores. And then I think, I've told you before, Culpeper was quite an iconoclast. He was quite a character. He could not help but insult the doctors and apothecaries of his day. And so he finishes his chapter on dandelion with saying, you see here what virtues this common herb hath. And that is the reason the French and the Dutch so often eat them in the spring. And now, if you look a little further, you may see plainly without a pair of spectacles that the foreign physicians are not so selfish as ours, but are more communicative of the virtues of plants to people. Classic Culpepper. Uh, he was one that just kind of insulted everybody right and left at every opportunity, and just a really interesting guy, sort of a bit of a rogue, you know. John Kehoe is the writer of what's now called an Irish herbal. It was originally the Herbarium hibernicum, if I remember correctly. It's late 1700s, maybe early 1800s. One of the most important herbal books written in Irish to record the Irish tradition. He said that dandelion has a cold and dry nature. Everybody says that of dandelion, which is very interesting. And if you're ever on a hot day and you're out cutting your grass and you haven't sprayed your lawn with chemicals, if there's some good dandelion greens and some of those stems, reach down, pick them up, and just eat them. And like I said, they can be a little bitter at first till you get used to it. They have a remarkable cooling effect on the body, and they seem to help with thirst. You know, when it's hot and I'm getting thirsty, I always grab some dandelions if I can. He said that dandelions strengthen the stomach, cause good digestion, reduce inflammation of the liver, cleanse the bladder and kidneys. And I guess you could say, I mean, that's a lot shorter than what Culpeper had written, obviously. And you know, the Irish, such as myself, are said to have the gift of the Blarney, which means we talk a little bit too much. Mr. Kehoe seems not to have inherited the Blarney, but Miss Grieve, another Englisher, as they used to say on Andy Griffith, she was an Englisher. She wrote a lot on Dandelion, and I'm not even going to. This might be about a third of what she wrote on Dandelion, and I'm going to try to sum this up because it literally goes on for pages. I mean, she thought this was absolutely one of the very best herbs in existence, as do most cultures that are not stupid enough to spray their lawns with chemicals. Um, she goes through the whole history. We don't need to go back through the history. She talks about how it was named and what called in various cultures and how it can be used as food and medicine. And I mean, she literally just goes on and on and on. But I'll try to get just to her more medicinal recommendations. And one of the things she mentioned, though, before I do move on, is that she enjoyed making sandwiches of dandelion leaves. She would take dandelion leaves, young tender leaves, and put them between two slices of bread with butter sprinkled in salt. So the addition of a little lemon juice and black pepper would improve the flavor. I think it's a great idea. That's sort of like how you do a watercress sandwich, so it's not actually that far fetched. And really, just recently, I took some old advice that I had been putting off for a long time. Yeah, I'm a big fan of radishes. Well, the English, especially in certain country regions, have a tradition of putting butter and salt on radishes and having it as a snack with beer. I had never tried it. I just, I kept putting it off. I finally ate radishes with butter and salt. You're mind blown. Whole different way of viewing radishes, and I have been eating radishes by the pound each day ever since. So I could see that flavor absolutely mixing very well with dandelion greens. I would probably put sliced radishes on that sandwich with the dandelion greens and butter and salt, and I think that'd be absolutely delicious. And a little bacon wouldn't go awry either. And she gives a lot of dandelion recipes as food. She also mentioned a dandelion beer. She called it a rustic fermented drink common in many parts of the country and also made in Canada. I know dandelion wine. I've never heard of dandelion beer, but she said a wholesome fermented drink is made from dandelions, yellow dock, and nettles. And I'm gonna have to give it a try. I mean, yeah, it'd be very good for you. And she gives a great recipe for dandelion wine. Like I said, dandelion wine is very easy to make. She talks about how the roasted roots could be used as a tea that was sort of a substitute for coffee. She said the first mention of dandelion as a medicine was in the works of the Arabian physicians of the 10th and 11th centuries, who speak of it as a sort of wild endive. Under the name Taraxacon, in this country we find allusion to it in the Welsh medicines of the 13th century. Dandelion was much valued as a medicine at the time of Gerard and Parkinson and is still extensively employed. And as far as medicinal actions, first of all, she mentioned that the milky juice that comes out of the stem can be used as a styptic. It'll help stop bleeding from small cuts. Like a styptic pencil, like if a guy cuts himself shaving, you can put that on there and it will seal the wound. You can use the dandelion juice for the same purpose. You can also use that dandelion juice to help remove warts, by the way. But as far as medicinal actions and uses, she said that the dandelion was diuretic, tonic, and slightly aperic. It is a general stimulant to the system, but especially to the urinary organs, and is chiefly used in kidney and liver disorders. She said at that point dandelion was still part of the official and patent medicines being used in England and America at the time. Of course, she recommended it for liver complaints and for kidney and bladder stones, all kinds of digestive issues, as a bitter tonic for dyspepsia, which is indigestion, and as a mild laxative. And in cases of dropsy or edema, where you're retaining water, it's just good all around. And she gives a lot of specifics. If you want to find her book, A Modern Herbal, or you'll find where I quote from this in my Encyclopedia of Bitter Herbs, she gives a lot of specific information on how to use the dandelions for kidney stones or for liver ailments or for such as that. We can use bitters to help the liver in two ways. We can stimulate the liver using herbs like gentian and Oregon grape root or barberry root, such as that, or we can soothe liver inflammation using what we would call a cooling bitters formula. And I made a bitters combining dandelion and burdock with licorice root. I also put in mint and juniper berries. It was really nice, very soothing, very good to help liver function, and a really great digestive aid, really good digestive bitters that I could use, when I wanted to take a break from my regular bitters formula, which does use ginseng and such as that in it. In more modern times, officially, plants for a future lists dandelion as being a commonly used herbal remedy. It is especially effective and valuable as a diuretic because it contains high levels of potassium salts and therefore can replace the potassium that is lost from the body when diuretics are used. All parts of the plant, but especially the root, are slightly aperient, cholagogue, depurative, strongly diuretic, hepatic, laxative, stomachic, and tonic. The root is also experimentally cholagogue, hypoglycemic, and a weak antibiotic against yeast infections. The dried root has a weaker action. The roots can be used fresh or dried. A tea can be made from the leaves, but is more commonly made from the roots. The plant is used internally in the treatment of the gallbladder and urinary disorders, gallstones, jaundice, cirrhosis, dyspepsia with constipation, edema associated with high blood pressure and heart weakness, chronic joint and skin complaints, gout, eczema, and acne. The plant has an antibacterial action inhibiting the growth of Staphylococcus aureus, pneumococci, meningococci, bacillus, dysentery, T. typhi, C. diphtheria, all the bad stuff. It seems to help inhibit the growth. The latex contained from the plant sap can be used to remove corns, warts, etc. The latex has a specific action on inflammation of the gallbladder and is also believed to remove stones of the liver. A tea made from the leaves is laxative. So, I hope you'll never look at a dandelion the same way again. uh, it is food, it is medicine. It should never be relegated to be a weed, and certainly for the love of all that is holy, please stop soaking your lawn in chemicals that could probably give you cancer when you could be eating what we call weeds, which are really good for you, good for your health, and good for your nutrition, and would have the opposite effect than cancer-causing and toxic chemicals. So remember, when you're gathering plants in the wild, always go to clean areas. You never want to gather off the side of the road where there's been, oil washing off the road. Make sure you're in a good clean area, and then just, It's dandelions. There's no danger known to dandelions. Trust me. So y'all have a great week. Get together with some people you love and have a good meal and enjoy these last few days of summer and, oh, God willing, some cooler and hopefully drier weather this fall. As I said, we have had a very wet year. It's been good for the dandelions, so I got plenty of them. All right, y'all have a great one. I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.